should be picking on everyone else. But please ask questions, interrupt. Let's try to make this as dynamic as possible so it's not just me doing a monologue. Okay? All right. Okay, so this is a sort of the outline of what I was going to talk about. What really is, why do we think research is actually worthwhile doing at the undergraduate level? What are the various opportunities? How do you make them possible? And then I'll not really talk too much about item number 4, but I'll say a few words about it. Okay, and if you're wondering who this fellow is, he's Wei Peng. He's actually at Snow Lab, 2 kilometers underground, and right beside him is one of the world's largest dilution refrigerators, opened up so you can see it. He was an undergraduate here doing research, and he's now doing graduate work. Okay. Well, so as an undergraduate, you can ask the question, why should you do research as an undergraduate? And one answer is you shouldn't. You're here to take lecture courses. You're here to do labs, right? How much experimental physics do you get in a lecture course? Kind of about 0? Yeah, right? It's a lecture. You don't actually have very much opportunity to do much. How much sort of research do you get done in the lab? You're learning how to use equipment, right? You're learning how to make measurements. Are you actually trying to discover something? No. Do you have a manual that tells you how to run the instrument? Okay, so you're not doing research there either. So one view is that you should just maximize the lecture experience, maximize what you get in the lab, and not get distracted by other things, such as doing research that's outside of the class. Some people could say, well, you can do research on your own time. Just get curious, try to figure things out. You don't need to be here sort of to do research. Okay, so that's sort of one way of answering that question. But if you were to ask, some, reasonably famous people what their experiences have been in terms of going from being just students to actually being people who actually are making discoveries or trying to learn about the world in a much more fundamental way, you discover that, you actually have to do things outside of the classroom. That in fact, the classroom is not where you make discoveries per se, or you're able to really develop insights that are yours, that you're making, but rather you have to be thinking about doing it outside. And so this is a quote this is Max Born. You all folks know who Max Born was, right? One of the sort of discoverers of quantum mechanics. And he just made the comment that, an alternate proof to a mathematics theorem, why would you think you would do that outside the classroom? Right? But he was actually trying to sort of understand things in a way that he hadn't actually been in a classroom. Okay, so the second possible question for why you should do research as an undergraduate, first is, it's yes. Okay, so you do have to learn stuff in lectures. You get a lot of what I call theory, right? You learn about electromagnetism, you learn about classical mechanics, you sort of learn about the thermal physics, quantum mechanics. We can go down the list. It's all theory, right? And is physics theory? No. Actually, physics is all about observing the world. The theory is certainly an important part of being able to summarize and put together those observations and make sense of things, and actually use that theory, if it actually works, to be able to predict and to deepen your knowledge. But you start from observations, right? You start from observing the world. You start from trying to make sense of it. And you don't do that in a lecture. Okay. So I would say that, all of that stuff I just talked about is what we will call table stakes. Everyone know what table stakes are? You just don't play enough card games, that's all. Okay. Table stakes is when you're actually, playing a game and you're betting on an outcome, right? Everybody has to put in a certain amount to actually get in the game. Those are table stakes. Okay. That's what you need to start. That's the investment you need to put in. That doesn't get you anywhere. Just allows you to sit at the table. Okay. So, yeah, you do well in your lectures and the labs, then that actually gets you to the place where now you actually are developing or have the knowledge to be able to now go well beyond that. And that's what a research experience is intended to do, is enable you to become not just, physicists in theory, but actually physicists in practice. All right. If you were to think about what a research experience is, it's not simply, being able to sit there and being told what to do and do it. But in fact, Bob Bergeneau, who used to be president here, who was now then became chancellor at UC Berkeley, a physicist, someone I knew well. At one point we were talking about undergraduate research. This goes back 25 years. And the comment he made was something that resonated with me. When you're an undergraduate, you sit in lectures, you're basically told what you're going to learn. Right? You're given a syllabus, maybe a textbook, maybe course notes, but you are told what you're going to learn. You don't have to make any choice whatsoever. It's all there. Similarly in the lab, you have various experiments that are set up. You actually have instructions. You basically don't have to make any decisions. They're all made for you. When you're doing research, there's nobody telling you what to do or how to do it. You have to make those decisions. Now, sometimes you have to go, the decision is, I need help because I have no friggin' idea what's going on. Okay, that's a decision, right? And they're not going to give you, so whoever you go and ask, they're not going to give you a book and say, yeah, read it here, right? They're going to be probably as clueless, or maybe not quite as clueless as you are, and maybe give you some ideas. But nonetheless, you're then going to have to make decisions. That's what research is about. You're the one who has to figure out how to get through a messy process to learn something. Okay, so that's just a very different experience than what you have elsewhere in your undergraduate program. I think the other part of it, which is, my sense is that most of us don't really understand what happens when you arrive here in first year and then you leave in fourth year. What has happened to you? If there's one thing that has happened to you, what do you think it would be? What would you have developed? What are you better at? Yeah? Learning? Okay. But is that unique to physics? What's unique in a physics program? What you learn? Yeah, Gal? Problem solving. Yeah, that's one way of thinking about it. You have actually become expert problem solvers. You're much better problem solvers than, I hate to say it, our chemistry colleagues over there. You're certainly much better problem solvers than the philosophers down over across the campus. Okay, you actually know how to deal with numbers, right? You're numeric. You know how to take problems that people don't quite understand how they work, kind of break them down and figure out how you make some progress in understanding. You know how to make approximations, right? You have a sick cow. You start by assuming the cow is spherical, right? But you start. Maybe a stupid way to start, but you start. And from that start, you then actually develop a way of solving the problem. And you're usually able to do it in a way that allows you to make predictions. That's numeric and test. That's unique to physics. Anyone want to argue with me about that? Is there another discipline that does that? Just think about that. That's what's unique. And so if I were to think about what I've been doing as teaching or helping people learn, is to help learn problem solving. Help provide all those tools that you need. Now, you've also learned a lot about how the world works. So the problem solving has been very specific in a certain sense to the sorts of problem that physics tends to actually deal with. But over the years, what physics has actually deals with has actually broadened. We do biological physics, right? We do a lot of cosmology and astrophysics. We do stuff that we call like soft matter physics, squishy stuff that you don't actually necessarily really understand. So now physics has actually become quite broad. I mean, it still has its boundaries, let's be clear. But you have econophysics. A lot of physicists actually do economics nowadays because it's a problem that they can actually tackle and solve. Okay, so that's what really is different about than an undergraduate research program. It's that you actually are learning how to do problem solving in a way that's just much more advanced than what you get in a lecture or in the lab. Because now you're having to do the real work to actually solve the problem, figure out how you tackle it. Okay, so I've more or less said all this, but if you were to break down what research is like, what do I say? You generally don't know what you're doing. True. Most of my research problems, I have no way of actually knowing how to solve the problem until I've actually started working on it. People, you can ask people, but usually they're just as confused as you are. In fact, usually they've wanted you to solve the problem so they will figure it out, as opposed to the other way around. Otherwise, why would you be even doing it, right? You can work for a long time without feedback, and not knowing whether it's going to work. When I talk to the students I work with, I say, okay, if you have a problem, okay, yes, at the first hint of a problem, don't come running to somebody to see if they can help you, but actually struggle with it for a while. But the but is, do not hit your head against the wall for more than about 6 hours, okay? At least not till it's bloody, which means that you have to make a choice. When have I actually spent enough time on the problem that I really should, maybe it's a good idea for me to see if, in fact, what I'm actually struggling with is an easy part of the problem and I can actually get past it. And it's actually a bit hard. My first experience as an undergraduate, in between third and fourth year, I was hired to do as a research assistant. And the very first day I was given a piece of Fortran code and I was told, well, it's been running on a computer at the lab. We want you to get it running here. It needs to be modified. Let me actually, go ahead and do it. Okay. Well, the very first thing I did was I erased the program. Okay. I was learning the operating system. I didn't know that if you said delete star dot star semicolon star, it would delete all versions of the file. Okay. Now, did I go to the supervisor and say, oh, sorry. I did have a printout of it. So I went and keyboarded it all back in, never told him, never admitted that I had actually done that. But that's the sort of stuff you do. You just continue to make mistakes, and if you can actually fix it, you fix it. And if you can't fix it, then you go and you beg for forgiveness, right? But okay. But eventually things happen. It kind of works. maybe, it's like, oh, a miracle. I've spent now 2 weeks trying to get it to work and it finally works, or it looks like it works. Right? Okay. This is a process, and it's not a very happy one a lot of the time. Right? You're kind of struggling. But it is actually what you need to do to understand stuff. And that's what an undergraduate research experience is all about. Figuring out how you can actually get through this without, just wanting to just go and jump off the 15th floor of Burton Tower. Okay. Now, it's also true that some people try to do it and they can't stand it. They just don't like, all of the imprecision, all of the lack of structure. They don't like the kind of problem they're being asked to solve. That's good to know, actually. It's good to know, because it will actually give you some insight into what you really would enjoy doing. But the same way that you can sit in a lecture and say, well, gee, I really love to be up there lecturing or doing teaching, you may actually also come to a conclusion that I can't stand being up there teaching. I mean, those are all experiences which enable you to learn more about yourself as well. So, okay. So it's good to be doing undergraduate research. So, okay, so now there are some practical aspects to this. When in your program should you actually start being ambitious about doing it? And I'm approached by the high school students if they can come and do work in my research group. Usually I'm not enthusiastic about it, mainly because I don't actually like to employ people or have people in the group come just for free. They're happy to volunteer and so on, but I think that's actually, it feels like I'm actually taking advantage of them. So unless there is some reason they're in the group, I'm actually paying them a fellowship, or they're actually part of a course, I'm actually not so keen on volunteers. High school students especially who don't know very much physics or the necessary math. Okay, so there are exceptions, but generally speaking, I don't go there. First year students, of the undergraduates who approach me for getting involved in research, probably about 10% of them are first year students. They've come in, they've hit the ground running, they really want to get involved in research, which is great. The challenge, of course, is that there are the whole bunch of second, third, and fourth year students who have exactly the same sorts of ambitions, and they know a little bit more physics and math, usually, than the first year students. Okay, so to the extent that I actually am sympathetic to the third and fourth year students who really are looking for a research experience, I will tend to, I can't get really enthusiastic about it. Second year, you actually do have some research opportunities, though they tend to be pretty limited still. Who's aware of the ROP program? Research. Who has actually been able to do an ROP? Yeah. It's a very small number of courses that are available. And it's not because second year students are, they're chopped meat, but it actually does come back to this question about where the focus tends to be, and it tends to be on third and fourth year students. That's just the reality. It would be great if there could be a research experience at every year as an undergraduate, but there are certain limits. And the limits here are really, the big resource are people like me who actually would be able to supervise. Right? Okay, so third year, somewhere between the second and third year is pretty popular. Third year and fourth year are, in fact, the most likely times that people actually get involved in undergraduate research. And fourth year in particular is the most popular. And in fact, I meant to, okay, I'll show you a slide in a few minutes where I break down what are all the courses that are, how many people are taking courses at what year level and what type of courses. But so before I get there, let me just sort of back up a bit and say that, physics has actually increasingly put more and more effort into making undergraduate research accessible to you. So if you go to the physics website, the undergraduate page, there's a whole list of stuff around opportunities in research. Okay. So, and this is actually just a screenshot of that particular part of the page. And you can see there are just a bunch of things there. And some of them I'll talk about. There are others that I'm not going to spend much time talking about. There's the physics-directed reading program, which is, it's really a directed reading program run by the graduate students. And then there is also then some of the opportunities for career exploration, which go beyond what I'm going to be talking about here. But it's a great place to get a lot of information. And I encourage you, at least at some point, to go through it and look at it all to get a feeling for what it is that there is out there. Okay, so there are kind of two different categories of kind of research experiences that you can categorize them this way. One is that we have a bunch of paid positions or positions that are associated with a fellowship. There are a number of them, all with four-letter acronyms that most people have a hard time remembering. Certainly I do. Undergraduate Student Research Award is a program that's it's probably the highest profile fellowship program we have for undergraduate research. Then there's SURF, which is an internal, that USR is a national program. SURF is a University of Toronto Physics Department program, summer undergraduate research fellows, a 6-week program. UTEA, University of Toronto Excellence Award, is also now an award that one can actually apply for that also provides support for doing research during the summer. Then there are summer employment opportunities where you just get paid as a research assistant. Literally, you actually fill out a timesheet, you actually put down the number of hours you work each week, and you get paid based on that. And we have, by the way, about between 30 and 40 undergraduates every summer working as paid research assistants. Now, some of those are not particularly interesting research jobs. They're not open-ended necessarily. Often you're working in one particular aspect or other of a research group or program. But often it's very similar to a SURF or the USRA. It's not something that we advertise very much. They're a bit hard to find, but we'll talk about how you actually can go around and look for them. Okay, and now the other opportunities are what we would call basically our supervised research and supervised reading courses, and the reason you pay us is that you're paying tuition for those courses. But they are part of your undergraduate program, and they actually count toward your degree and count toward your major or specialist program requirements. These are well structured. Everyone, again, I'll go through some of the detail, but each one is actually going to be defined by a supervisor and you. There is going to be an assessment, grading assessment, and then you work one-on-one. How many people have done one of those? Okay, so looks like it's maybe about 20% or so, right? But they are the thing that we've probably put most of our resources into from a point of view of the academic staff within the department. It's actually become important enough that we now actually give teaching credit for people who actually do supervise undergraduates in research programs. Okay? So we actually now recognize that it's actually as important for us as the educators to actually be involved in supporting undergraduate research as it is giving lecture courses. So it gives you a sense of how important we think it is for you to and so hopefully that also gives you a sense of why it should be important to you. Okay. All right. So that first category, as I say, there's a sort of a host of these. The USRAs really are seen as the most prestigious. It's a competition. The department has between 15 and 20 of those every summer. And people apply, they get ranked. Usually it's based on their transcript. There is the additional information. So it has, that to me is a big disadvantage of the program, but that's how it's run. But it's seen as an award, a fellowship. You put it on your resumes or CVs. And in fact, it's recognized nationally as something that's important because you've competed for it. And you don't actually even have to hold one here, but you can compete for them in other university departments, in other departments. So there is actually a fair bit of opportunity for it. And to be, when I look at this and I have to make choices, I personally, for example, can supervise 2 or 3 undergraduates at a time. I first want to make available research opportunities for the USRA students. And so those are the ones I would wait for, and then we can talk about other types of research experiences that I would be able to supervise. But it gives you a sense of the priority given to that. SURF and UTAA are also, they're prestigious awards. They are competitive. SURF has a bit more information. It asks for a research statement from you, a personal interest, and it's not just about grades, but it's what you actually want to be doing and how strong an impression you create. And if you want to see what kind of research projects there are, these are actually listed all on our website. There's a list of all of the SURF projects that have actually been held. And there are also a list of all of the USRA projects which have been actually held in the department, along with the supervisor. So you get a sense of the breadth of research, the projects, by just going and scanning that. And here is a list taken from the last year's USRA. There were 19 of them. And you can see the list. So if this is actually one of those resources where if you want to go and work in, say, you're interested in quantum optics, for example, okay, you can go down the list and look at all the people doing quantum optics. They are supervising undergraduates. So they're actually not an unreasonable individual to go and talk to about what they may be able to help you with in terms of a research project. And we've actually tried to make this increasingly available for people so that you can actually you can be as informed as possible. It's not a secret, in other words, how you go about doing this and what there is. Okay, so these supervised courses that I've already sort of mentioned, they are our most common form of what I call an immersive research experience. And immersive for me means it's long-term, it's at least one semester. You are embedded within a research group. You actually are working with other undergraduates, other graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, the professors. You really are into it. You're deep into it. The students I work with, they are typically spending 2 or 3 hours a week in meetings with the rest of our group members. So to give you an idea of just how much time they're spending in that sort of an environment. But so the process, you first have to identify a supervisor. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about that. It's actually not a bad skill to develop. It comes back to a comment I usually make to students that if there's one thing you should do when you start a course, get to know the professor. It's the best way of getting to know a professor and for that person to get to know you. Because when you get to this point and they're doing something you want to actually work in, it's pretty easy to go up to them and say, okay, hey, I was in 252, remember me? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but okay. But at least it's an easy intro to actually begin a conversation. But if you haven't done that, then it's going to be all cold calls, which we'll sort of talk about. But once you've identified a supervisor, then you have to develop a project description, about a one-page summary of what the research project is all about. A grading scheme, because it is a course after all, we have to assign a grade. It's usually, 30% an oral exam. Some of you I've been seeing in oral exams over the last few weeks. Then there's usually a written part of the project. There is also maybe presentations you have to give through the course of the year. Sometimes it's just an assessment of how well you've done in the lab on the research project. But that you decide with the professor what in fact the syllabus should be. And the most useful hint here, it doesn't have to be a professor here in the department. It could be any professor in the University of Toronto, as long as there's enough physics in the research program. So we have people who actually supervise students from CAMH, the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. They have a big imaging program over there. And so they actually have a bunch of physicists working at CAMH. They actually take undergraduate students and supervise them. Similarly, we have people at SickKids who actually are supervising physics undergraduates. We have people at the University of Toronto Institute for Aerospace Studies. We have a bunch of people in chemistry, in electrical and computing engineering. These are all people that you can actually do a physics undergraduate research course with. And there's a list of some of them on the website again, if you're interested to see. It's a pretty long list of people who have actually supervised physics undergrads. So it's not just the people in the department you can actually approach, but others. So in any event, these things actually end up being submitted for approval. I'm the one currently that's been coordinating this program. So all of these proposals go to me. I review them, make sure that they make sense. If they're not, we have a dialogue to make sure that it's actually a research project that I think makes sense. And then it gets approved and you just move on. You go start working. And there's a list of all of these, again, by year on the website. So again, you can actually see what people are doing as undergraduate research. There's the title of the projects, who the supervisor is. So that gives you sort of a database to look at with to actually get an idea of what might be possible. Note that this is all on your initiative, right? It's only going to happen if you actually start doing it. Okay, so supervised courses, this is a pie chart I just put together. These are all the supervised courses that have been taken this academic year. There are 96 of them. So 96 students have actually have taken supervised research courses in the last 12 months. The biggest piece of this here are fourth-year research project courses, about half of them. The next biggest piece is third-year, full-year research project courses. And then there are bits and pieces of one-semester courses, most of them fourth year, and then a whole bunch of third year. And they're both reading courses and, and research project courses. Most of them are research project courses. So that gives you an idea of the scale. So it's close to 100 of them every year. So it's not something that is, you have to look hard for it, but you do have to actually, they take the initiative to create that opportunity. So how do you approach it? This is now stepping into sort of detail. How would you go about even beginning the process? The first is that it's actually probably good to decide what area you are most interested in, that you want to actually explore. We're not talking about a career for life. We're just actually talking about what do you want to learn more about? What do you want to learn about? What are the big questions in that area, and how can I actually contribute to answering them? So that's the first thing, because if you've done that, you actually are going to sell yourself much more effectively to someone who may be a potential supervisor. Okay? If you've already decided you've learned enough about it that you can talk semi-intelligently about the area, then that's actually at least going to get their attention. Because we love to talk about what we do. I love to talk about dark matter and particle physics. That's what I've been doing for a long time, and I've done it for a long time because I love doing it. So if you come and want to talk to me about dark matter, okay, pull up a chair. And that's what most of my colleagues would actually do. So if you come already having sort of demonstrated that, yeah, I'm interested in it, okay, let's have a chat. It may or may not lead to something, but at least it'll be a chat. Okay. But remember that it's not about picking a career, all right? And in fact, when we talk about research and undergraduate research, it's not that you're choosing to be a researcher for the rest of your life, right? It's part of your experience as an undergrad, and what you do with it later on is going to be what you do with it, right? There is no commitment here. But by doing this sort of assessment, you're actually going to make some well-informed choices, or at least choices that are informed as possible. Okay, so so I started by thinking about choosing a supervisor, having chosen a research field, then looking at a supervisor. You know, we do this a lot for our graduate students. Graduate students come in and they must find a supervisor really quickly. So what do? You know, they actually, you know, I chose my PhD supervisor based more on how they think about things and what they really are working on. That was actually a quote from Stephen Julian. And you know, his comment was that he was fortunate enough to survive that experience. You know, I chose my supervisor because he was working in something I was interested in, and I actually liked him. When I got to know him, okay, this guy is a cool dude. It turned out, you know, we became friends and colleagues for the rest of our lives, or for his life anyway. So graduate students talk to members of the group. They talk to other students who have been supervised. They look to see what other students' experiences have been. Okay, that's what you do as a graduate student. So let's see what this translates into. If this is what graduate students do to figure out what their research supervisor is, how does that translate to your experience? Well, I chose my PhD supervisor. Well, you're going to choose a supervisor on who you can find, who you can convince will actually supervise you. You talk to members of the group and get more information. Well, you probably don't know anyone who's in the group. Okay, if you do, that's great, but don't expect it's going to actually be a significant part of the information that you have. Okay, if you have previous students who have worked with them as undergrads, it's good to talk to them, see what the experience was like. You know, your friends will actually tell you the truth. You know, don't go near the individual. You know, so in the end, you have to choose. And often you have to choose without enough information, right? You just have to choose. It's not the end of your undergraduate career if you don't choose wisely, but okay, you have to make a choice. All right, so once you've figured out what area of research, now you have to then, having chosen at least one or a few supervisors or possibilities, you have to go and get to have a chat with them. You know, if you know them, you can knock on their door or send an email to set up a time to meet. Go and talk to them, talk about what you want to do. If you don't have any of that, then you have to do this cold call. And usually people find how many people like doing cold calls? How many people's skin, you know, crawls if they think about doing a cold call? Right? Okay, it's not very comfortable, eh? No, all right. But it's actually a really great skill to develop. And it's a skill. You don't have to really like doing it, but it's a skill. And you're going to, at various times in your life, you're going to end up having to do it. So why not learn now? A typical cold call letter. You'll send a letter to a supervisor who you don't happen to know. And this is sort of just a draft of one example of it. But you can get the idea, introduce yourself. This is what I'm interested in. Is it possible for us to have a chat? Here is a resume or a CV I already have. Let me know if I can actually have a chat. Now, you send these things, and I talk to undergraduate students, and they tell me, well, about 1 in 5 of those things get answered. Don't take it personally. They're usually, as you can guess, we end up getting flooded by email. And cold letters like this tend to get put at the bottom of the stack to deal with, and they may get dealt with that evening, or they may get dealt with next month, or they may get lost in the inbox. I mean, there are all sorts of things that happen, but don't actually take it personally. I try to answer all the emails I get, but I know there are things that slip through. And I don't even want to talk about what my inbox looks like. Okay, this is actually the approach. Okay, so a few other comments. People worry, well, I'm only going to be considered a possible candidate if I have a great transcript. Sorry, folks, most of us don't have great transcripts. I did not have a 4.0. I was an undergrad here. I did not get a 4.0 CGPA. It was okay. I think it was 3.5. But, it wasn't straight A's. The point is that we actually, our bar, if you like, we have a cutoff for the CGPA on our supervised research course, which is like 2.7. And if a student comes and says, they would like to do this project, but I don't meet the criteria, I'll have a conversation with them. So grades are not the thing that we get hung up over. Okay? I mean, you should get good grades. I'm not suggesting you go and just kind of tank your courses, but that's not the thing that actually is going to make or break how things are going to work out for you. There are some areas of physics where, in fact, people are pretty hard-nosed. Theoretical physics, especially theoretical particle physics, they really don't want to look at you unless you've taken all of the math courses that they think are relevant and done well in them, because they don't think you'll be able to succeed or be able to make progress. All right. If you're not planning to go to grad school, this is one of the big, I think, misconceptions, that you all are being prepared to be graduate students. The reality is that probably no more than a quarter of you, maybe somewhere between a quarter and half, are going to go on to a second degree. And at least half of those going on to a second degree aren't going to do a do a physics graduate program. Okay, that's what it is. These are the numbers. And there's no secret about this. Right? I'm not suggesting that those people who actually want to do that in this room shouldn't do it. I'm just pointing out that a lot of you are going to be going off in other directions. And doing an undergraduate research program, as you've already heard, is quite consistent, let me say this positively, with whatever you want to do because of the skills that it helps develop. Okay. So making sort of the most of your experience, first, research is hard. Let's actually recognize that. You are out there competing with other smart people. Just have to recognize you're not going to necessarily be the smartest, the brightest bulb in the room. I'm not even going to be that apologetic. It does take hard work. And at times it's going to be competing a lot with other things you have to do. And research is about figuring out how you keep going. I think it was General Patton who said, when you're going, actually no, with Churchill, when you're going through hell, what do? You keep going, right? And that's what a research, if you actually find yourself just in an awful situation, and you're not making progress, and you just want to just forget it all, you just keep going. That's an essential part. of doing research. Don't waste too much time reading about stuff. You just do it, even if it's going to break things. Keep good records. This is actually the biggest problem I see most of us have. We don't keep good records anymore. It used to be that I put everything into a notebook. And if you go to my office nowadays, you'll find shelves and shelves of notebooks. Well, I stopped doing paper notes about 15 years ago. So now, hopefully, I never actually lose all my electronic records. But even now, I don't take notes. At least I don't take enough notes. I never have taken enough notes. But ask for help when you're stuck. Don't be afraid of looking or sounding stupid. People say there is no stupid question. Well, I'm sorry, there are stupid questions. Let me be clear. I think there are stupid questions. But there aren't that many of them, actually. So don't be too afraid. Okay. And talk about your work to whoever's going to listen. They're probably going to be interested in something that you're doing. Okay. And finally, actually use some of the skills to write about what you've been doing. If you want writing about stuff is actually good. It helps organize one's thinking, especially when you're doing something which is as disorganized, as unstructured as research. Okay, so last comment. Oh, okay, that's actually, sorry. That's it. Enjoy your researching. I probably have time. I have probably minus 1 minute for questions because I have an oral exam for one of these supervised research courses. Any quick questions? Yes.
Quick one. Do you expect maybe within the next few years that the research project courses will be brought into the curriculum?
You mean as part of a requirement? It's a really good question. Right now, the applied physics lab in third and fourth year is what we see as being the pinnacle, if you like, of experimental, instruction, I guess, in experimental physics. We put a lot of resources into that. Right now, I think we have 6 professors spending all of their time in the advanced physics lab. That's 10% of the department is working in the advanced physics lab. So that's actually a huge amount of work. So that's where we really put most of our effort. Now this has been on the side until more recently when we actually started to recognize it as part of what people's workload is. And I see that actually just continuing. Where it will end, I don't know. But we are the most research-intensive department in the university. By every measure. We bring in the most research dollars. We have one of the largest graduate programs. We actually have the largest undergraduate research program. We have the largest proportion of faculty who actually get research funding. You can go on and on and on. Okay. It's really important as part of our undergraduate education that we actually do this. It's really important. Okay, last question. Yeah. Where are you right now?
Right now I'm finishing first year.
Finishing first year? Yeah, so actually, I'm not sure I wouldn't argue that you should spend a lot of time trying to find one, but getting positioned to it, start chatting up your professors. That's probably the best thing you can do. Get to know the faculty, get to know other people in the department, become a known entity. Right? Not just someone who walks in the door for a lecture. So that's the best thing to do. And then at the end of second year, think about what you could do. Like over the summer, the supervised research course. That's kind of an easy way of getting in. And third and fourth year, yeah, I go whole hog, right? Do everything I just suggested and more. Okay, I'm going to have to